Joining us now is Matt Christman from Chapo Trap House. What's up, Matt? How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. I know you've been patiently waiting to come on, and you probably heard what we were talking about with, Joe Biden and how the media is trying to really present him as someone who's moving toward FDR style economic reforms.
Yes.
What's your
He's
thought on that?
FDR pilled, I heard.
Right.
I mean, they're using what they have to sell a product. I mean, they have this guy in there now whose victory was a triumph for the Democratic establishment, shorn of any pretense that it represented anything other than continuation of the existing power there. I mean, not only, of course, did it take the entire Democratic Party to come together to defeat the Bernie Sanders insurgency, but the person of Biden being president throws all of the things they were saying, Democrats are saying about the necessity for inclusion and diversity at the top of the ticket, and sexual assault, Me Too, all of those were thrown away and discarded to get this guy across the finish line. And now he's there, so they have to have a narrative to keep people invested in this thing. Because honestly, at this point, I think for a lot of these political journalists, it's not even really about manufacturing consent among some group of people. I mean, the people who care about politics are pretty much stuck caring about this stuff, like the same way you're stuck caring about your favorite sports team. I think it's really more about them convincing themselves that they have not signed off on a totally cynical power projection here, that this is a real project that they're a part of, and that their job is to disabuse the cynicism of naysayers. But really, they're just talking to themselves, it seems like, more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's been remarkable just how quickly all of the kind of woke selling points for Democrat leaders and stuff like that has just gone by the wayside with Biden. This obviously incredibly unwoke guy. When that funny clip when someone asked him how many genders there are, and he said at least 3, which is one of the greatest moments in the history of campaigning.
That shows that he's still a pro, even though his mind is in a twilight state. He's still a pro because he clearly has no idea about any of this gender stuff, but he got some sort of prep from some young staffer to let him know, whatever you do not say there's 2 genders. And so he figured, okay, that means minimum of 3, but beyond that, he wasn't going to try to outkick his coverage. It shows that he's still got a few flashes left.
Yeah, it's like, he's technically not wrong, I guess, or in a way. What do you make of the situation in Bessemer and the Amazon PR tweets? I guess, for lack of a better term, I mean, they're kind of very public. I don't know. I don't know what to call it. Was it a meltdown or what the hell was going on?
I guess just an attempt to. I mean, it is baffling to see, because it does seem like it would not be in their best interests to appear that truculent and combative when talking to senators and stuff. But I mean, more than anything, it probably just speaks to Amazon's sense of invulnerability. They are now like the economy, basically, especially since the pandemic began. They're in a position where they're going to be able to just sort of vertically integrate the entire American economy under their umbrella. And with that the case, maybe they're just sick of humoring these politicians who really everyone knows can only really sort of flex and posture about this stuff, that they don't really have any will or ability to rein in Amazon in any meaningful sense. And so at a certain level, you must just get bored and annoyed with having to pretend that they actually are interested in doing any of that. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens in Bessemer, certainly. If there is a successful union drive there, if it leads to other places unionizing, and how Amazon's going to respond to that. I mean, a lot of this also, of course, is keyed into the PRO Act, which to me is the real indicator of like the likelihood of transformative change occurring through legislation, because the stuff that people have been ballying as FDR2 so far is really just more money sort of thrown around to people without challenging any underlying structures of power. Whereas the PRO Act would actually change the relationship between labor and capital for the first time in 40 years, which is why I have a hard time imagining that it will actually pass. And if it doesn't, I think that Amazon is probably right to think that they can really say whatever they want and not have to worry too much about the consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right about that. And you're right. I mean, it's interesting because I don't know if there's an actual misunderstanding of what the difference is between what Biden's doing and what FDR managed to accomplish through the New Deal. But it seems to me that journalists think that, just increasing the amount of money that Biden is willing to throw at a problem is the same thing as what FDR did. But it wasn't just simply the spending. It was empowering workers. It was actual systemic change that empowered workers. And Biden so far hasn't accomplished anything close to that. But he has said that he's in favor of the passage of the PRO Act. And Chuck Schumer came out and said that he's secured 45 votes in the Senate for it. And as soon as he has 50 votes, he's going to bring it to the floor for a vote in the Senate. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, 45 is nice, but that's one of the geniuses of the Senate. And one of the reasons that it is so integral to our system is that it's where change can go to die, and where blame for that can be dispersed away from any responsible position. So even if the position of the actual leadership of the Democratic Party is that the PRO Act is a bridge too far and that they don't want to see it pass, the Senate allows them to allow process to fill in for that, and the reality of having Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema in the Senate to stand in for the actual reason that this stuff doesn't get passed, which is that the party is structurally beholden to capital and hostile to workers at this point. And I could see them saying 45 votes all they want, and I'll believe it when I see it. It just seems highly unlikely.
I wanted to ask you about The Republic for Which It Stands, the book you've been doing kind of a sort of live reading series on, because it focuses on America in the second half of the 19th century. Matt Karp also just wrote a long piece in Jacobin comparing our current moment to the political moment of the 1880s. Why are you interested in that era? What does it have to say about, like, why is that era, why are the 1880s so hot right now? What's going, like, what is, why are we partying like it's 1888?
Well, I think that the piece that you refer to that Matt Karp wrote gets at one of the most important parts of that, which is that the current model of politics that we have is one that dominated that era, where you have wild polarization between the parties, deep party loyalty, but a lack of actual class coherence to that. Like the Democrats and Republicans of the Gilded Age were coherent, coherent parties that had discipline and structures of control and had mass bases. But even though the working class at that point was starting to emerge as a coherent block of interest within the American political system, they had the two parties essentially divided the working class by geography, basically. If you were a northern urban worker, you were a Democrat. If you were a southern white of any kind, you were a Democrat. If you were a southern black of any kind, you were a Republican. And if you were a northern farmer or someone who didn't live in a big city, you were a Republican. And that meant that these even though we had all of the high stakes and drama and conflict of a robust democratic system, at the top of both parties, the agenda of the emerging robber baron class was just being unquestionably processed and promoted, and that is when we get the full corporatification of American politics. The Civil War really created the context for capital to essentially finance capital to fully invest American power, and they were able to do it over the course of the Gilded Age because politics was, while it was robust and high turnout, it was devoid of a class basis. And we are in that situation now, where we have these two parties that have robust internal networks, robust brand associations, but where the class basis is divided by geography and a cultural ideology that's generated by that geography. So it's essentially looking at the past to see a similar structure and what challenged it and how it changed, and trying to apply any of that to the current moment, I think.
Yeah, that sounds like a good reason to look to that era. I wish there was more focus on that as opposed to, what we're seeing right now regarding political discourse, at least on social media, which proves to me that there's really more of an emphasis on cults of personality within Congress and trying to decipher whether or not any one lawmaker is progressive enough or leftist enough, or what's in their heart. Are they going to do the right thing? It appears that that has become the beginning and end of all political analysis right now. And so how do we get past that? Because it's not really about what's in any particular lawmaker's heart, right? This is a question about power dynamics. And unfortunately, there's very little power in unorganized labor. How do you get past all of the obstacles that we're noticing right now with identity politics playing a role, with personality, cult of personality narratives playing out in social media? How do we get past all of that and focus on what actually matters, which is getting people to join forces, organize together for their common interests?
I mean, I've been saying on my streams and on the show for a while now that you have to stop caring so much about this as a spectacle. Like what you say about investing in the true beliefs, the true intentions of members of Congress. Like, is AOC your friend or not? It very much is just celebrity culture transformed to politics, and it is a result of our awareness of our powerlessness. If we are not going to be able to dictate terms to those in power, then their decisions are fully up to their own discretion. But what that ignores is that if you're in Congress, if you have run to be a member of, certainly in the federal government, you have likely constructed a edifice of ideology that can accommodate any number of decisions, any number of choices, and then justify them to yourself based on what is best for you. Because, I mean, you wouldn't be doing that. You wouldn't be running for Congress if you did not have ambition. And so the intent of the heart is truly beside the point. What matters is the incentive structure that the politicians are going to be beholden to. And so the answer, sadly, isn't anything that can be prescribed, because it lies closer to the conditions of life and away from the firmament of politics. And I'd say the first step, and it is a small one, but I think a necessary one, seeing how deeply emotional and overwhelming these arguments seem to be for people, is to reduce one's emotional investment in politics above the level of the local, because the ability of the people in any sense outside of capital formations to influence meaningfully government at that level is so low that you're really just trying to psychically push things in one direction or another. And there's almost an unspoken assumption that if you will it, if enough people think enough about something, it'll actually like spin the dial. But in reality, it's going to be much slower, more tedious, and more locally based than anything. Like that's why I'd say that the Bessemer union action in Alabama is far more important than anything happening in Washington right now, because it's something that people are doing in their lives and has the chance to create structures of solidarity and action that can be replicated elsewhere. Nothing that we say to politicians, no amount of tweeting or even phone calls or emails to politicians is going to overcome the structural incentives of power. The power has to be built at the grassroots.
Yeah, and part of that, this phenomenon that or one of the manifestations that we're seeing from this kind of polarization, sort of seemingly like our politics is stuck and there's not a lot of avenues for people, is you see a lot of people who are not kind of on the left or whatever, trying to find common cause with the so-called like right-wing populists. Sometimes they call themselves post-left, whatever. What do you make of that whole phenomenon? Like, I guess I see like the like, they see the libs, they see the Democrats, and they're like, well, we can't do that. So they try to find something. But what do you make of that whole phenomenon?
I think what it is people recognize the limitations of posting as praxis within the Democratic Party, because they saw what happened with Bernie. They saw, oh, we're really only talking to ourselves, and we don't actually have any power over this structure because it is fully determined by capital. But they don't want to take the next step to say, okay, well then posting as praxis is a dead end entirely. The fantasy of like a reaching out, whatever this means, reaching out in what sense? You're literally just talking about like what, retweeting each other, posting together. None of these people, none of these forces have any actual influence, power, or represent any real concentration of people. There's no coordination at any level of within these formations. I mean, none of them represent anybody. None of them represent anybody other than consumers of political media. And so this contest really ends up just being a contest for viewer share, for audience. And that audience is people who want to be basically lied to believe that their investment in these questions is meaningful.
So Matt, I'm getting a word from our producer Kale that we'd like to get your take on the boat that's stuck in the Suez Canal. Any thoughts on that?
What's up with the boat?
She's beautiful. I don't know why people need to stop fat shaming her. I don't know. I don't know anything about. I think the only thing I thought was interesting about the boat is that I read it. I don't know anything about nautical engineering, but someone said that if it was, because the claim was that it got pushed by the wind, and the claim is that it happened because it was just too big. The boats keep getting bigger, but the canal doesn't get any bigger. So the boats are taking up more space. They're more vulnerable, and I think that just speaks to the collapse of infrastructure and the failure of any kind of coordinated economic system to accommodate like global trade, because it's all being run on these ad hoc bases. I do think that if it were to somehow bring down the global economy, which it won't, but if it were, there would be something sort of poetic about a global capitalist system being killed essentially by a heart attack or like a stroke, like literally one of the arteries getting blocked, since that's a number one cause of death in the capital in the West, where all that stuff is coming.
Yeah, the boat is big. It's the pictures that got small, I guess, is the is the final thought. Matt Christman, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Check out Chapo Trap House if you haven't heard of it. It's a podcast. It's like a bit, I guess.